Hello students, I am Kcet Pandey and welcome to biology class, and I will be your biology teacher. So today we will go with a chapter from your first year or also class 11 or PU1, that is the cell, the unit of life. So this chapter mainly comes from your cell unit, and here we are mainly having three important chapters. The first is the cell, where you will mainly understand about the fundamentals of cell, its structure and the components of the cell. And along with, you will also study the functions of the cellular components. And in another chapter, you will mainly study about the biomolecules, which are mainly important for the formation of cellular structures and also its functions. And finally, in the last chapter of that particular unit, that is cell unit, you will also study about the cell division and cell cycle, right? So with these three important chapters, we will mainly start our discussion from the chapter called as the cell, that is the unit of life. So generally, when you look into the examination point of view, for your Neet examination, you will expect around 2 questions. In general, we can say that you can see around 2 questions for your Neet examinations, right? Yeah, and these 2 questions are generally associated with the functions, okay? Mainly associated with the functions of cell. That is what you will mainly expect in your examination, okay? So try to remember all the functions of the cell, okay? And as they are very much important. So we will start our discussion with a few important parts of the chapter, which we call it as the synopsis. Yeah. So now, if you look into the world or our surroundings, you will observe both the living and also the non-living type. Okay. So if you look into your surroundings, we observe both. There are certain things which are living, and there are also certain things that are non-living, right? So now the first question that arises is, what makes an organism living? Okay. Is it the cells that makes us living? Right? So now if you try to give an answer for this particular question, what makes an organism living, if you try to ask this particular question, we can say that it is the molecules. It is basically the molecules that makes us living. Okay. Now what kind of molecules? See, if you look into the cell structure, okay, okay, inside the cell, none of the components are actually living, which means that no component inside the cell is actually living. Okay, all of them are actually biomolecules. They're basically molecules. All of them are actually molecules only, right? So no molecules are basically chemicals, right? They are basically chemicals. Then how do these chemicals keep us living? How do these molecules keep us living, right? So now, of course, we will try to answer this question in your first chapter, that is the living world, but I can just give a small what we can say answer over here, that it is the interaction. It is the interaction between the cells, right? It is mainly the interaction between the cells that actually keeps us living, okay? And also the interaction between the cells is mainly because of the molecules. The molecules that are present inside the cells, okay, they are actually involved in the interaction. As a result, we can say that they are actually living, right? Because of the interaction between the cells, through the help of molecules, they are actually keeping us what? They are keeping us living. This is what we can actually make a small inference from this particular question. Okay. So now, another statement you can look over here is that all of the living organisms are made up of cells, right? Yes, if you call any organism as a living, okay, if you say that anything is living, it should be and must be made up of cells. However, you also see certain exceptions to this rule. Exceptions. Okay, you also see certain exceptions to this rule, and the exceptions mainly include the virus. Okay, they mainly include what? Virus. Now, virus are exceptions because they belong to the realm of both living, okay, and also the non-living. We can say that they are both living and also non-living, right? So now, what makes the virus say that it is actually living? Because if the virus gets inside the cell that is host, it can actually replicate. It can replicate, or in other words, we can say that it can actually reproduce. Right? So the ability of reproduction or the replication of the virus, we can call it as actually living, right? But however, without the host, okay, if there is no host, the virus cannot reproduce. It cannot reproduce, right? So based upon this property, we can say that virus is actually non-living, right? If there is no host, if there is no cell for its reproduction or replication process, we can say that the virus is completely non-living in nature, right? So we can say that the virus exhibits this particular exception, that it is not made up of any kind of cell. But however, it is also made up of some biomolecules. It is also made up of biomolecules that are found in living cells. They're also found in the living cells. Remember this, right? So they also say that the virus molecules or virus particles, they also have biomolecules. What do you mean by biomolecules? For example, proteins, carbohydrates, okay, lipids, and your nucleic acids, right? So all of these molecules you find in the virus, and not only you find in the virus, the same biomolecules are actually also found inside your cells, right? So as the virus exhibit both the living and non-living property, but we cannot say firmly that virus is actually living, but we cannot even rule out the property that it is completely non-living also, right? So we can say that all of the living organisms are actually made up of cells. That is actually true, but the exception mainly includes the virus, right? So now, on this planet, on our planet Earth, you also see that there are unicellular organisms and there are also the multicellular organisms. Now, what do we mean by unicellular organisms? The organisms which are made up of single cells. Okay. Do we have any examples that are mainly made up of single cells? Exactly, we are having, such as mainly the amoeba, 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 right? And we are having the protozoa, so the paramecium, right? Trypanosoma, okay? Even the plasmodium. All of these are actually what? Made up of single cells. Bacteria, okay? Bacteria, right? The prokaryotes, they're all made up of what? Single cells. At the same time, you also see there are many organisms. Majority of them are actually the multicellular organisms. What do we mean by the multicellular organisms? Which means that they are made up of many cells. It is not a single-celled organism. They are mainly made up of many cells. That is what we mean by the term multicellular organisms, right? So I hope that we have understood the concept of what makes us living, okay? What makes an organism living? It is mainly the interaction between the cells makes us actually living, and interaction between the cells is mainly brought because of the molecules that are present inside the cells, okay? And there are also the organisms, if we call them as living, they are made up of cells. Exceptions mainly includes the viruses, but however, unicellular organisms, we are having that, we see that they're mainly made up of single cells, and multicellular organisms are mainly made up of many cells or multiple cells. This is what we have discussed till yet. Right. So now let us look on to the another concept, that what do you mean by cell, what actually cell means. So let us erase this. Yeah, so what is a cell, right? The first question is, all organism, we all know, just a moment ago we discussed that all living organisms are made up of cells. That is true. But however, what is actually cell? What does a cell actually mean, right? On what basis we call that, if anything can be called as cell? On what basis we call it? So the first basis is that it should exhibit an independent existence. Okay, it should exhibit what? Independent existence. So what do you mean by independent existence? Independent existence in the sense it can live and carry out the basic functions of living. It should live, okay, it should be live, okay, and it should carry out all the basic functions of a living organism. That is what we mean by the independent existence, right? Now, and also we have one more point that tells us that performing essential functions of life, okay, performing essential functions of life. So what are the essential functions of life? Okay, there are various functions of life, but however I will just list out a few over here. The first is metabolism. Okay, metabolism. Okay, now what do we mean by metabolism? The reactions. Okay, we mean by the term metabolism, we mean by it that it is mainly the reactions. Okay, so what kind of reactions? The reactions that basically yield energy. Okay, the reactions that yield energy, and also the reactions that are mainly involved in the formation of new molecules. The reactions that basically yield energy, at the same time the molecules that are also involved in the reaction that are mainly involved in the formation of new molecules. Okay, so these are what we call it as the reactions, and hence the sum of all these reactions, that is catabolism and anabolism, will make us the metabolism. Right, the next we are having is division. Okay, the next important property is the division anta heltivi. Okay, so what do we mean by division? That is a cell division. Okay, we mean by the term cell division, right? So cell division, we all know it is mainly the mitosis, and one more we are having is the meiosis, right? So all these cellular division reactions, they should be occurring in the case of organisms. Okay, so this is an essential function of life. Okay, the ability to divide, okay, for the ability to have metabolic reactions, conducting of these reactions, we call it as an essential function, right? And finally, we can also say that it is reproduction. Okay, the ability to reproduce and produce a progeny, it is called as the reproduction. And one more is for slow changes. Okay, so there should be even slow changes, and slow changes we mean by the term, it is evolution. We mean by the term evolution. Okay, so because of these slow changes, what happens? New organisms arise. Okay, new organisms actually arise. Okay, so and this new organisms arising, we call it as the species. We call it by the term called as the species, right? So reproduction is an essential function of life. Division is also an essential function of life. Metabolism, we also call it as what? An essential function of life. So I hope we have made it quite clear that what makes, or on what basis we call it as a cell. Right? So now let us look into some of the important events in the cell biology. Okay, some important events in the cell biology. Okay, one of the first person we have to credit, that is the Anton von Leeuwenhoek. Okay, he was the person who actually described the living cell for the first time. Okay, but however, we also hear one more scientist called as the Robert Hooke. Okay, Robert Hooke. Now this person is also a scientist who actually observed the cork cells and coined the term that is the cell, empty chambers. He actually observed empty hexagonal chambers, and these hexagonal chambers were somewhat similar to that cells. Hence, he called them as cells. Okay, but Anton von Leeuwenhoek was the first person who described the living cell. Right, and one more scientist who came quite later was the Robert Brown, and he actually observed and discovered another structure, that is the nucleus. Okay, so we all now know that a nucleus is the main directing center of the cell. Okay, nucleus, we can write over here, mainly controls the cell functioning. Okay, we now know that a nucleus basically is involved in controlling the cell functioning, and we actually classify the types of cells based upon the presence or absence of nucleus. Okay, we do classify the cells based upon the presence or absence of the cells. Right, now we can also say that there's also one more event. There's also one more event in the cell biology, that is the invention of electron microscope. Okay, because the electron microscope was invented, what happened? We could look into the ultra structure of cell. We could actually look into the ultra structure, that is a more detailed structure of the cell could be mainly identified, was mainly observed, and they were mainly studied. Right, so invention of an electron microscope is also, we consider it as a important event in the cell biology. Okay, so the invention of we can say electron microscope completely changed the cell biology rapidly in a short moment of time. So now we can start our discussion on one important concept in the cell biology, which is a famous theory called as the cell theory. Okay, it is the doctrine. We also call it as what? A doctrine. Okay, what do you mean by doctrine? Doctrine is something that is a standard. It is well accepted. There is no reason to what we can say denial. Okay, we cannot reject the theory. It is a standard theory that we are actually having. Okay, and it is the cell theory, the first and foremost famous theory in the cell biology. Okay, so now we can see that there are two important scientists over here. The first one we are having is the Matthias Schleiden. Okay, he was actually a German botanist, and one more we are having is the Theodor Schwann. Okay, and this person was basically a British zoologist. Okay, so these two people were involved in the formation of a cell theory initially. Okay, in the beginning stages, these two guys were the people who formulated the cell theory for the first time. Okay, and they formulated the cell theory based upon few important observations they actually did. Okay, so what were their observations? For example, Schleiden mainly observed that plants are mainly formed of cells, and these cells basically involved in the formation of tissues. Okay, so how do we define a tissue? Tissue can be defined as it is the group of cells that are basically having a same function. Okay, same function, similar or same origin. Okay, having same function, similar origin, and also same structure. Okay, any group of cells that are having a same function, similar origin, same structure, we call them as what? Tissues. Okay, so plants are basically formed of cells, okay, and these amalgamation, conglomeration of cells are basically involved in the formation of tissues. Okay, so this was a very important observations done by the Matthias Schleiden, who was a German botanist. Now, later, another scientist, that is the Theodor Schwann, he observed that animal cells, especially animal cells, they are having a thin outer delimiting layer. Okay, if you look into the diagram of any cell, how you draw cell, okay, we always draw a cell with a large big circle, and we also draw one more small circle inside over here, and we give a dark shading for this. Okay, this is how we draw the cell, right? So now Schwann identified or observed that every cell, animal cell, is having an outermost delimiting layer or a thin layer. Okay, thin layer, right? And now we know that this thin layer is actually called as the plasma membrane. Right? So we will be studying about the structure of the plasma membrane in more detail shortly in the upcoming classes. Right? So it is mainly about the thin layer called as the plasma membrane. Right? Now, Schwann also considered the plant cells. He also wanted to know like how do the plant cells are observed, or what is the difference between the plant cells and the animal cells. He interestingly found that even in the case of plant cells, they are having an extra structure, okay, which is more rigid, okay, and this rigidity is mainly involved in the formation of what? The conferring the shape and structure to the plant cells. Okay, and this rigid structure is mainly called as the cell wall. Okay, so it was Schwann who actually observed that animal cells are having a outer thin layer, and now we call this thin layer as what? The plasma membrane. Okay, but at that time he did not say it as plasma membrane. We now know that it is actually the plasma membrane, right? And he also observed in the case of plant cells that they are having another structure called as the cell wall, right? Yes. So Schleiden and Schwann were the people who actually proposed the cell theory initially, okay, and they formulated the cell theory based on important observations, right? And those observations were, as we have mentioned over here, plants are basically formed of cells that these cells mainly form the tissues. And Schwann observed that animal cells are having a thin outer layer, which we now know as the plasma membrane, and plants are actually having a rigid structure called as the cell wall. So these were the two important observations which were mainly used for the formation of the cell theory initially, right? Now, what is the conclusion that we can derive over here, right? We can erase this over here, right? Yeah. So the conclusion that we can derive is that plant cells actually have a cell wall, which is a completely unique character, and this character is mainly found in the case of plant cells. Okay, yes. Of course, we now have identified many living organisms that also have plant cell wall, okay, like that of plant cells. We also now know that there are many other living organisms which also have this cell wall, okay. But though they have cell wall, it doesn't mean that the chemical nature or chemical composition of the plant cell wall is similar to the cell wall of those organisms. Remember that point, right? Now, animals and plants are made up of cells and cellular products. Okay, so here this is quite an important point. You students have to remember this. Okay, you students have to remember this, that plants are made up of animals and plants are made up of cells, and they are mainly made up of the cellular products. So these were some of the important observations done by, or the conclusions that we can derive from the cell theory proposed by Schleiden and Schwann. Now, but however, there was one problem with their theory, who they had actually proposed initially, okay, and that problem was they did not know how do the new cells actually come into existence. Okay, how did the new cells arise? New cell arose. where do these new cells actually come from? So this was an important question that the initial proposed theory of cell was not answering it. Okay, it was not completely answerable by Schleiden and Schwann. Now this was actually approached. This problem was basically solved by a scientist called as Rudolf Virchow in 1855. Okay, in 1855 he actually came up with a modification. Okay, he came up with a modification to the cell theory. Okay, and he said that cells actually divide, and these new cells are mainly formed from the pre-existing new cells. Pre-existing new cells. So this was a very bold proposition given by Rudolf Virchow. So he said that there is one cell, okay, and this cell divides into two cells. Okay, yes. So if you ask the origin of these two cells, where did these two cells come from? These two cells came from the original existing cell, and this is the original existing cell. This is what Rudolf Virchow meant. Okay, so all cells actually divide, and these new cells are mainly formed from the pre-existing cells. Okay, and he actually expressed this idea with a very famous phrase called as the omnis cellula e cellula. Right, so this is one of the most commonly asked question in your NEET examination. Who gave the phrase omnis cellula e cellula? Right, one of the well-known phrase that you have studied since your biology. So now we can say that Rudolf Virchow modified the cell theory. Okay, he was the person who actually modified the cell theory. Okay, and what were the modifications he done to the theory, and what do we know about this theory as of now? We can say that all the living organisms are made up of cells and products of cells. Okay, all the living organisms, if we are using the term living organism, it means that they are mainly made up of cells, and the products of cells only they are made up of. Second thing is the point that we have just studied, that is all cells arise from the pre-existing cells. Okay, all cells arise from the pre-existing cells. They do not arise spontaneously. Remember this point. Okay, yeah, so generally in your NEET examinations you will expect two types of questions. Okay, match the following type of questions, and also one more type of questions you may expect, or generally you see in your examination, is correct, that is choose the correct or incorrect statement. Okay, so these are the most common type of questions that you people experience in your NEET examination, see in your NEET examination. Okay, so see, generally what happens is that if they directly ask you the concept based questions, okay, what is this, what is that kind of question, you will obviously answer. Okay, but what they do is that based on one particular concept, they ask you that which of the following statement is true, which of the following statement is not true. Okay, so if they ask in that particular way, you have to read all the concepts should be studied. Okay, you cannot escape from this. You have to study the concept thoroughly. Okay, though you may expect one or two questions from this particular chapter, but they will make sure that they will cover maximum part in that one particular question. Okay, so don't expect it to be direct or simple based questions. Okay, so yeah, we will try to solve some previously asked questions from your NEET examinations also. Anyway, we shall proceed further now. Overview of cells. Okay, so now let us try to look into the cell overview. Okay, so now If you look into the plant cells, they are actually having the cell wall. Okay, we have discussed that, right? So plants have a unique property, unique character, that is they exhibit the cell wall. But whereas in the case of animal cells, they do not have any kind of cell wall, but instead they exhibit directly the plasma membrane. Okay, they do not have no cell wall. They do not have cell wall. Right? So remember this particular point. The second is both the cells have a dense structure, okay, that is the nucleus. So as I said, right, so here I have drawn the diagram of cell, okay, and we draw in this way, right? Always we draw a structure like this inside, and this structure we are referring to none other than the nucleus. Okay, so we know that nucleus is the structure that basically has the chromosomes. We know that it mainly contains the chromosomes, and chromosomes is the one that basically contains the genetic material of the living organism, that is the DNA, right? So DNA is the genetic material in the case of chromosomes or any living organism. Okay, there are exceptions to this rule, okay, and in some cases, mainly examples include the viruses, where even RNA is also genetic material. Okay, an example for this we are having is the HIV, which actually has RNA as the genetic material also. Okay, so now chromosomes mainly contain the genetic material, which is mainly compacted. Remember, okay, it is compactly arranged. We will study about the structure of the chromosome in the last part of this particular chapter in more detail. Right? Yes. So we know that the nucleus mainly contains the genetic material, that is the DNA, that is a deoxyribonucleic acid. Right? So we will study about the DNA more in detail in the biomolecules chapter. So let us not discuss those points over here. So the next one we are having is the classification of the cells. So just a moment ago, I had even said that based upon the presence or absence of nucleus, we actually classify the cells, right? So now you can see that if the nucleus is actually present, if you see the presence of this dark structure, that is a nucleus, then we say that it is actually eukaryotic cells. And eukaryotic cells are way more advanced and well-developed cells than those cells which do not have the nucleus, that is, the nucleus is absent, and we call these cells as the prokaryotic cells. And prokaryotic cells mainly includes the bacteria, remember? Okay, bacteria, and these prokaryotic cells are generally unicellular. Okay, but in the case of eukaryotic cells, you find both type of cells, or both type of organisms, I mean, that is unicellular organisms also you do find, and also the multicellular organisms also you do find in the eukaryotes. But in the case of prokaryotes, you find strictly only unicellular organisms. An example for prokaryote we have mentioned, that is the bacteria, right? The next one, irrespective of the cells, that is maybe eukaryote or maybe prokaryote, both kind of cells have a fluid-filled matrix. We refer them as the cytoplasm. We call it as what? Cytoplasm. And in the case of eukaryotic cells, you find organelles, okay? And these organelles are generally membrane bound. They are basically what? Membrane bound. Okay, it means that they are mainly made up of membranes. They are mainly made up of what? Membranes, right? So this is, we are having organelles, and organelles mainly include the next one, the first one, that is the endoplasmic reticulum. Okay, endoplasmic reticulum is mainly involved in compartmentalization of the cytoplasm. The next one we are having is the Golgi apparatus, or also called as the Golgi complex. Okay, yes. The next one we are having is the lysosomes. Okay, one of the most and well-known, you know about lysosomes. They are popularly called as the suicide bag of the cells. Okay, yes, because they mainly contain the hydrolytic enzymes. Now, at the same time, we have also heard the another organelle called as the mitochondria. That is the powerhouse of the cells. The next one we are having is the microbodies, and one more is the vacuoles. Small bubble-like structures, okay, cavity-like structures present inside the cells. You also find a common structure between the prokaryotes and also the eukaryotes. So this structure is found in both the prokaryotes and also the eukaryotes. And this structure we are speaking of is mainly the ribosomes. See, both prokaryote or eukaryote, they are mainly found, but although the function is same, the main function of the ribosome is mainly what? The synthesis of proteins. Okay, formation or synthesis of proteins is mainly done by the ribosomes. Okay, but however, there is some structural difference between the ribosomes of the prokaryote and the eukaryote, but it is a common structure that you find in both prokaryote and eukaryote, and also the function is same. Remember this. So along with this, you also find one more organelle called as the chloroplast. I have mentioned about the mitochondria earlier. Okay, so we also find one more structure exclusively found in the case of plant cells, that is the chloroplast. Commonly we call this as the plastids, right? And one more structure, okay, that is called as the centrosomes. Remember, centrosome is a non-membrane structure. Okay, for example, organelles that are mainly made up of membranes, except ribosomes and the centrosomes. Okay, they are non-membrane structures. And the centrosomes are exclusive structures, that is, they are not found anywhere else except in the case of eukaryotes. They are mainly exclusively found in the case of eukaryotes, right? Yes. So now let us look into the cell size. Okay, so we all know there is, cells mainly come in different type of size and also the shapes. There is no hard and fast rule that every cell should come in this particular size and shape. Okay, there is no constant size and shape among the cells in the whole planet. So now, for example, the smallest recorded living organism, that is cell, is a mycoplasma. Okay, mycoplasma, which is having a 0.3 μm. Okay, the symbol is in this way. Okay, that is micrometers, 0.3 μm. Right, and in the case of bacteria, the typical structure, the typical size mainly is around length is around 3 to 5 micrometers. Okay, 3 to 5 micrometers. Remember this, right? And the largest cell we know is basically the ostrich egg. Okay, it is a single cell. Ostrich egg is actually the single cell, and it is the largest cell. And human RBCs are known to have a length of around 7 micrometers. The longest cell in the lengthwise, if you see, we are having the nerve cells. Okay, that is the cell that is mainly involved in the formation of nervous system. Okay, and we also know about one more organism that is PPLO, pleuropneumonia-like organisms. Okay, so these organisms are known to have a size of around 0.1 micrometers. Okay, if you consider viruses, for example, they exhibit a size of around 0.02 to 0.2 micrometers. See how tiny these organisms are. Okay, they are way more smaller than any living organisms. Okay, yes. So now let us look into the shapes. Okay, let us look into what? Shapes. See, the general shapes that you see are the disc-like, polygonal, okay, and next one we are having is the columnar, cuboidal, and sometimes there may be no specific shape. We call it as what? Irregular. Okay, so for example, tracheids are basically the water conducting elements. Okay, and they are having elongated shape. For example, one more we are having is the mesophyll cells, which are mainly involved in the photosynthesis. They are having a round and oval shape. The next one we are having is a branched and long cells are mainly the nerve cells in the nervous system. Amoeboid shape. Okay, amoeboid andre, it looks like wiggly in this way. amoeba. Okay, amoeba is completely irregular, right? Hence we call it as amoeboid shape. And white blood corpuscles or white blood cells mainly show the amoeboid shape. Biconcaved and round shaped you see mainly in the case of RBC, that is the red blood cells or the red blood corpuscles. If they are thin, elongated and narrow, long like structure, okay, these are mainly columnar epithelial cells. Okay, columnar epithelial cells, we mainly study them in the we have heard about them mainly in the intestine, right? They're mainly involved in the secretions. We all know about that. So these are some of the important points that we have discussed in this particular class. So we will begin our discussion with a few important questions from this part that we have actually discussed, right? So let's start with the first question. We will erase this over here. Yeah. So what does the first question tells us? What makes an organism living? Okay. Metabolism, interaction between the molecules, and next one we are having is the formation of a new cellular products. The last option we are having is the all of the above. Okay, so if you remember from the discussion, you can just go back to the first part of the video. Okay, and you can see that we have mentioned three important properties, that is metabolism, ability to reproduce, okay, formation of a new cellular products. Okay, see, the third statement you may find not relevant. Formation of a new cellular products. For example, a cell will divide to give us two cells, right? So these two cells are derived from where? An existing cell. Okay, an existing cell, and these two cells are product of a cell only. Hence, we can say that even formation of new cellular products is also organism living. Okay, so metabolism, interaction between the molecules and the cells, and the formation of new cellular products. Okay, all the three are actually, we can say, the property of an living organism, or it makes an organism living. So hence the right answer over here is D. Okay, all of the above is our right answer. Yes, so let us move on to another question. Which of the following statements about the cell is true? Cells do not show independent existence, performing vital functions of life, fundamental unit of living organisms that have nucleus only, okay, and anything less than structure of cell does ensure independent living. Okay, so which of the following statements about the cell is true? They are asking mainly about the statement about cell is true, should be true. Okay, cells do not show independent existence. So if you look into the first part of our discussion, we have mentioned that we specifically told that cells must have independent existence. They must have, right? If they don't have independent existence, they cannot survive. Right? Next, performing vital functions of life, essential functions. We have mentioned essential functions, right? So essential functions or vital functions all mean the same. Okay, all mean the same, right? So the B statement is actually true over here. The B statement is actually true. Fundamental unit of living organisms that have nucleus only. See, there are some cells which do not have nucleus, that is mainly prokaryote. Though they don't have nucleus, don't you think they are also living organism? Exactly, even they are also living organisms. So hence we can say that this statement is not true, A is not true. The next is, anything less than a structure of a cell does ensure the independent living. Right? See, according to this statement, anything less than structure of cell, right? So we have discussed mainly about the cell structure, okay, overview of cell. If there is something less than that of what we have discussed, part of cell, it means that still it can live as an independent organism. The statement is not true, okay? If there is something less than the general structure of cell, whatever we have discussed about the overview of cell, if any one part or any one component is missing, it cannot live independently, okay? So hence the fourth statement is also false, not true. So we can say that B statement is actually the true. okay, performing vital functions of life is a true statement about the cell. Now, moving on, which lenses in electron microscope are used to control and focus? Okay, so convex lens, concave lens, electric lens, magnetic lens. Okay, so here in the case of electron microscope, you do not see any kind of a glass lens. Okay, if you have studied in your physics, okay, generally you will study about the lens and lens maker formula. Okay, I'm not a physics teacher, but at least I remember from my classes that generally all the lenses are mainly are made up of glass. Okay, but however, electron microscope, they are exceptions to this particular rule. Okay, because electron microscope mainly uses electron beams instead of visible light. And these electron beams behave like light only. Okay, they behave like light, right? Remember this. Okay, and the bending or controlling the path of the electrons can be done by electromagnetic lens. Okay, so it is not the electric lens, it is not the concave lens, or it is not the convex lens, it is mainly the magnetic lens. So D is our right answer over here. Right, I hope I have made the points quite clear over here. Now, moving on, the structural details of the cell and ultrastructure of cells have been studied by the autoradiography. Next is a phase contrast microscope, electron microscope, X-ray diffraction method. Okay, so we have discussed the ultrastructure means the most detailed structure of cell. Okay, it is only possible to study such ultrastructure of cell with the help of electron microscope only. So hence C is our right answer. Phase contrast microscope is mainly used to study the live cells, okay, and it is based upon visible light only. Okay, so hence this is wrong. Autoradiography is mainly used to localize some important proteins or biomolecules, so that is not the right answer. X-ray diffraction method is mainly used to study the biomolecules, mainly the DNA. Okay, if you remember from your molecular basis of inheritance, you have studied mainly the X-ray diffraction for the structure of DNA. Okay, that is as you people have studied. So X-ray diffraction is also wrong. So the right answer over here is the electron microscope. The next question, a very simple question. Who proposed cell theory? That is Schleiden and Schwann, Watson and Crick, Morgan and Mendel, Robert Hooke. The answer we all know, it is the Schleiden and Schwann. A is our right answer. The next question. Which of the following is an exception to the cell theory? That is bacteria, fungi, lichen, virus. We know, we have discussed in the first part itself. Okay, all living organisms are made up of cells. The exception mainly include the viruses, right? Virus is an exception to the cell theory. Now, which of the following is true? Okay, Schleiden observed that plants have a cell wall. Schwann observed that animals have an outer layer and plants have a cell wall. Omnis cellula e cellula was introduced by Schwann. Initial cell theory formulated by Schleiden and Schwann explained cell formation. Okay, so now the following statement is true. They are mainly asking about which of the following statement is true. See, the first statement tells us that Schleiden observed that the plants have a cell wall. No, it was mainly the Schwann who observed that plants have cell wall. Okay, so hence it is not a true statement. Schwann observed that animals have outer layer and plants have a cell wall. Exactly, this statement is the true statement. B is our true answer over here. Omnis cellula e cellula was introduced by Schwann. No, it was done by the Rudolf. Okay, Rudolf Virchow. This guy was the one who introduced it. So C is a wrong statement. Initial cell theory formulated by Schleiden and Schwann explained the cell formation, that is, a new cell arises. Okay, that was mainly done by Rudolf Virchow. Again, the same guy does this work, right? So again, D is a wrong answer over here. So the right answer we are having is B, that is, Schwann observed that animals have outer layer and plants have cell wall. Right. So let's look into next question. The presence of a thin outline in animal cells observed by Schwann is now known as endoplasmic reticulum, vacuole, cell wall, plasma membrane. Okay, I cannot write over here, but we all know it is D. Okay, so D is our right answer, that is plasma membrane. Okay, so Schwann mainly observed that animal cells have an outer thin layer, and this thin layer is none other than the plasma membrane, right? So we have discussed this point. Just recall the discussions. Now, cells divide and arise from a pre-existing cell was the observation made by Rudolf Virchow, Matthias Schleiden, okay, Theodor Schwann, and one more we are having is the Robert Hooke. The answer we all know, it is the Rudolf Virchow. He was the scientist who actually made the proposition that the new cells actually come into existence from the pre-existing cell only, right? So hence A is our right answer over here. Now, which of the following is not true about this cell theory? Okay, cells make the living organism. All living organisms are made up of products of cells. Okay, all cells arise spontaneously, and Rudolf Virchow modified the cell theory. Okay, so they are mainly asking the statement is not true, in the sense it is incorrect statement. Okay, they are mainly asking the statement which is not a true or incorrect statement. Okay, we know that actually Rudolf Virchow modified the cell theory. It is actually a true statement. Okay, so he made those statement, that is all new cells arise from the pre-existing cells. Okay, that is a modification done by the Rudolf Virchow. We know that. Next, all cells arise spontaneously. Spontaneously means like that, de novo. Okay, spontaneously in the sense de novo. Okay, they can just arise by themselves. That is not true. All cells actually arise from the pre-existing cells, right? So hence this statement is not true. We know this. The next one, the B statement, is actually what? All living organisms are made up of products of cells. Exactly, a true statement. And cells make the living organism. It is also a true statement. But the not a true statement or false statement or incorrect statement we are having is C option, all cells arise spontaneously. That is the wrong statement. Hence C is our answer. Now, which of the following is absent in the prokaryotes? Okay, DNA, RNA, plasma membrane, mitochondria. The answer is mitochondria, right? Mitochondria is an organelle, that is a membrane-bound organelle, that is exclusively found in the case of eukaryotes. You don't find this structure in the case of prokaryotes, right? Hence, you find DNA both in prokaryotes and also in the case of eukaryotes. RNA, you also find them, right? And even the plasma membrane is also found in the case of prokaryotes and eukaryotes, but absent an exclusive structure found in the case of eukaryotes, that is the mitochondria. Now, the absence of dark dense structure, okay, they are mentioned as the dark dense structure in the cell indicates that Golgi apparatus, the centrosome, vacuole, nucleus. Okay, so they have mainly asked which is the dense structure that is absent. That is D. Nucleus is basically absent. In the cell indicates it is mainly the nucleus that is absent. Okay, vacuole is not true, centrosome is not true, Golgi apparatus is also not true. The next question. the main arena for the cellular activities is the endoplasmic reticulum, cytoplasm, nucleus, vacuole. The answer is the cytoplasm. Okay, so we know that the living reactions, that is a metabolic reactions, all of these metabolic reactions actually occur where? In the cytoplasm only, right? Hence we call it that it is the main ground or the arena where all these cellular activities actually takes place. Okay, so hence we also say that it is the cytoplasm that mainly keeps the cell in the living state. Okay, it is cytoplasm that keeps the cell in the living state. Why cytoplasm is important for keeping the cell in the living state? Because it is the arena or it is the place where the cellular activities. What do you mean by cellular activities? The not replication, mainly the translation and metabolic reactions. Okay, mainly the metabolic reactions are occurring in the cytoplasm. Okay, so yeah, so B is our right answer, that is cytoplasm. Now, which of the following is a non-membrane structure that is present in both prokaryote and eukaryote? Okay, that is a ribosome, centrosome, inclusion bodies, food vacuoles. Okay, the answer we know it is mainly the ribosome, right? So ribosome is mainly involved in what? Protein synthesis. We have discussed this, right? And it is completely a non-membrane structure. Ribosome is mainly made up of RNA. Okay, and this special kind of RNA we call it as what? rRNA, that is ribosomal RNA, right? Yes, so it is a non-membrane structure. Centrosome, we have discussed about centrosome also, but however it is mainly a what? Eukaryotic structure. Okay, it is not a prokaryotic structure. But inclusion bodies is an exclusive prokaryotic. Okay, we will study about the inclusion bodies function later on. And next is food vacuoles. You find vacuole-like structures both in prokaryote and also eukaryote, right? So according to the question, the only structure which is found in both prokaryote and eukaryote, that is the what? Ribosomes. Let us recall this. Remember this. Now, which of the following has organelles have ribosomes? Which of the following organelles have ribosomes? Okay, so they are mainly asking about those structures, even cell organelles that have the ribosomes. The options are mitochondria and endoplasmic reticulum, mitochondria and nucleus, chloroplast and mitochondria, a prokaryote and eukaryote. Okay, so you know the answer. It is very simple. It is a chloroplast and the mitochondria. Okay, even these two structures, cell organelles, even they are also having the ribosomes, right? Nucleus does not have, and endoplasmic reticulum does not also have the ribosomes. Okay, so prokaryote and eukaryote are mainly your cells, right? Yeah, so chloroplast and mitochondria. I think if I'm not wrong, it is 70 years, I think. Okay, it is mainly the 70 years or 55 years, something like that. Okay, I don't remember 55 years or 70 years. Okay, we'll just discuss that elaborately in the further classes. Anyway, let's move on to the next question. Which of the following is not true? Mitochondria is a double membrane structure. Chloroplasts are found only in plants. Okay, and prokaryotes lack membrane-bound organelles. Ribosomes are the only non-membrane structures in the eukaryotes. The not true, they have mainly asked about the statement which is not true. The answer we are having is D. Ribosomes are the only non-membrane structures in the eukaryotes. This is not a true statement, because apart from ribosomes, you also find centrosomes, right? So even you find centrosomes in the eukaryotes, which are also the non-membranous structures, which mainly help the cell for cell division, right? They mainly help for the cell division. Let's remember this important point. So hence the right answer we are having is D. D is our right answer. Yeah, moving on. The smallest living cell is bacteria, mycoplasma, RBC, and one more we are having is the egg of the ostrich. Egg of the ostrich is mainly the largest living cell. RBC and bacteria are quite big in size, okay? But however, in the case of smallest living cell, it is mainly the mycoplasma. And one more we are having is the PPLO. Of course, it has not been given in the option, but the right answer we can say that it is mainly the mycoplasma. Okay, yes. The next question we are having is which of the following cells are long and branched? Okay, so mesophyll cells, RBC, and nerve cells, columnar cells. We know the answer is nerve cells, because columnar cells are mainly long and narrow, and RBCs are mainly biconcaved, and the last one we are having is the mesophyll cells, which are mainly the round and oval. Columnar cells, we know, as I said, that is narrow and long. We have mentioned it, right? Long. So the right answer we are having is the nerve cells. Nerve cells are mainly what? Long and branched. The next question: which of the following statement is true? The functions of the cell vary according to the function they perform. And the white blood cells are amoeboid in shape. Okay, the largest single cell is ostrich egg. Last one we are having is the all of the above. Okay, so here there should be small modification. The function of cells vary according to the size. Okay, so there is a small typo error, I guess. It is mainly the size. Okay, the functions of cells vary according to the size. And next is we are having is the white blood cells are mainly amoeboid in shape. It is also true. The largest single cell is the ostrich. All of the above. The right answer is all of the above. The functions of the cells vary according to the size and shape of the cells. And WBC, we know they are mainly amoeboid in shape, and largest single cell we are having is the ostrich egg. The next question: identify the mismatch. RBC round and biconcave. Columnar epithelial cells round and oval, trachid elongated, bacteria 3 to 5 mm in length. Okay, so we know the mismatch we are having is B, because the epithelial cells, that is the columnar epithelial cells, are mainly long and narrow but never round and oval. Okay, round and oval, we are having the example of the mesophyll cells. Mesophyll cells are mainly round and oval, right? Yes. So in this particular part we have discussed some of the important questions, and you may expect one question from here also, okay, in this particular part of the chapter. So you people can start solving some important questions from this particular chapter. Okay, so we will also look into some of the previously appeared questions from your Neet examinations. Okay, that we will do at the end of the chapter. Okay, don't worry about it. So we will meet in the next class with the same chapter, with the next part of the chapter. Till then, start solving questions, and thank you.